Last of Us episode 9, the finale. Is it the masterpiece that everyone is saying that it is? And the answer is, of course, absolutely not. It is lackluster. It just stumbled over the finish line for me. And I think that in general, it was just too boring, too slow paced, which has led this to be just an average show.
Jog on.
So taking into consideration that this finale's runtime is the shortest out of the entire season, we start off this episode with some filler, with a backstory for Ellie and her mother and how all that came to fruition. Ellie's mother is played by Ashley Johnson, who played Ellie originally in the video game. And there's just one note that I want to talk about here, and I talked about it last week with Troy Baker, and I know that Ashley Johnson is 39 years old. Right? Fair enough. If we look at this picture here that I have on screen, you can see a comparison almost between who we have playing Ellie in Bella Ramsey and Ashley Johnson. Now, for me, you might think that this is a crazy, outlandish idea. I think that Ashley Johnson could have played the role of Ellie. She's 39 years old, and I think that she could have done a better job and totally wouldn't have been out of place playing this teenage girl. Because obviously the voice is there, we know that. Even last night in this episode that I watched, when she was being attacked by the zombie, the one zombie that showed up in the entire season, she sounded exactly like Ellie. And I thought it was hysterical that BuzzFeed ran with this Last of Us episode 9 also really called attention to how perfect Bella's casting as Ellie is, with fans now seeing the resemblance between Bella and Ashley. And I'm looking at these pictures and I'm like, so much is jumping out to me. One, Bella Ramsey doesn't look like Ellie whatsoever, and two, she doesn't look like Ashley Johnson whatsoever. So again, we've got some mental gymnastics going on here with the mainstream media. If you look at the picture that's on screen right now, undoubtedly Ashley Johnson looks a lot more like what we perceive to be Ellie from the game than Bella Ramsey. And Bella Ramsey's performance is definitely questionable again in this season 1. And I guess that could be down to the fact the writing was absolutely garbage. It made Ellie this obnoxious piece of shit who all she could do was say fuck and tell Joel what to do. As I said with Troy Baker last week in terms of Joel, because the script was so disgraceful and tore down everything about what the character of Joel was, and doing a massive disservice to Pedro Pascal, who's a fantastic actor, then the same thing happened with Ellie. So if the showrunners made the decision to make Joel's character, played by Pedro Pascal, be this whiny, anxiety-ridden fool, then Troy Baker could have slotted in there and done that. And as for Ashley Johnson, she looks more like Ellie, she sounds more like Ellie, she doesn't look like an elderly woman because she's 39, and she's probably a better actor. Why couldn't she play the role? Just saying. So after that unnecessary backstory, we get into the journey, the final furlong, as Ellie and Joel make their way to the hospital. It's extremely rushed, and the only takeaway from the entire episode is that Joel became a bumbling fool. So at the end of episode 8, we saw that he embraced her and he thought he was going to lose her, and you're like, okay, I buy into the fact that there's a bond after happening right now. After this journey, the bond is there and it's set up. Joel loves this kid as a child, as his daughter. So that brings us into episode 9, where he pretty much walks around like some sort of doofus, talking about playing board games and, hey, I'll teach you guitars. And then he's like crying every 2 minutes and talking about how he wants to kill himself. And you're just like, wow. What a deconstruction and subversion of the character of Joel. So no matter what happens at the beginning of this season, and no matter what happens at the end of this episode that we'll get to in a minute, where they're making this big massive deal about the decision that Joel made in terms of being violent or not being violent, no matter what we look at in terms of a broad stroke on this series, the character of Joel in the HBO show The Last of Us is destroyed. So that's the takeaway. So they finally reach the hospital, and the badass Joel is too busy crying into Ellie's face looking for some sort of acceptance, and she's like not really interested, and she's kind of like keeping her distance from him. Then a couple of goons come up from behind him, they sneak up and they knock him out. And you're just like, oh, okay, it's expected at this stage, right? Because Joel isn't really able to handle himself. That leads us into the climax and the third act of this episode, where Joel wakes up and Ellie's missing. We know that she's having the procedure done on her where they're going to have to go into her brain and she's not going to make it, but we'll have a cure, right? So it's all about this like egalitarian utopia. He's demanding to see Ellie, And he gets knocked out again by two goons that are like, belt of a wet clod into the face would take these guys out. But Joel gets dropped to his knees and he starts to cry again. So about 25 minutes later, after Joel has a panic attack, an anxiety attack, and he stops crying, Marlene tells the two goons, off you go, grab him there, bring him on and get rid of him. So you're like, okay, this is interesting. How's this going to play out? So they're marching him down this stairwell and you're thinking, okay, how is this going to be handled? Because in the game, this was a monumental action scene when these two guys get killed and Joel goes on a rampage to get to Ellie. You're thinking, okay, let's see how to do it. And in fairness to this episode, I have to say that I was quite impressed with the way they did it. I actually did like it. It was done in this kind of a nuanced way where the sound was nullified and we had an orchestrated music theme that was playing. The only thing that was a little bit, I guess, jarring was the camera kept panning to his feet. So we had this slow motion scene where he made his way through the hospital and Joel was being a badass for once in this season. And he took out these guys and it was like, okay, here we go. Is this the redeeming moment? But it happened so fast. It was over and done with within 1 minute 30 seconds. Makes his way into the operating room, boom, shoots the doctor, kills him. Should have shot all the nurses there as well. There's no way I'd let them off. He picks her up and away he goes. He gets into the interaction in the car park with Marlene, and again we know what happens there. That leads him into the journey back to the communist resort, and he's having the kind of back and forth with Ellie, and it was almost done in terms of a verbatim scene for scene, but not really, because Cookman decided to slot in the fact that Ellie would announce to him at the very end of the show that she was in love with Riley and she loved her and this, and it was just like, dude, we get it. Your tacked on DLC has been fitted into the show, and now everyone that watches the show are getting their mind reconditioned to think that that was part of the original game. We get it. Your ego is at play here and you're forcing it in. So it ends with Ellie asking Joel a question about the Fireflies, about what happened, and he tells her lies and she says, is that really the truth? And he says, yeah, it definitely is. And she goes, okay. So it ends pretty similar to the game, except for it's less poignant, not as well acted, and we don't believe a single word of it because of what has transpired with the deconstruction of their characters. So you're kind of left there thinking, if I had never played the game, this show would have been binned after episode 3. Like 13 minutes into episode 3, this would have been gone, never watched again. And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people. So in the end, is there rewatchability? Absolutely not. Is this a masterpiece that everyone is talking about? Absolutely not. Are we looking forward to season 2? Absolutely not. Let me know down below what you think of this season as a whole and whether you're excited for season 2. Cheers.